Welcome back to Shinsen Sports, where the talk is fresh and so are the hosts. My name is Trey,
And I'm Fred.
and we are here for another episode today focused on football and how the season's been going so far, maybe a playoff picture and other events so far in the season.
Week 14
Week 14.
in the
So
NFL. I
we'll
think
read
things are becoming a little bit more clear, little by little.
Right.
I think things are a little bit more clear in the NFC, so maybe we'll start by discussing the NFC side.
Okay. NFC. So who do you think is leading in the NFC right now? Like, who's your pick for the NFC, let's say?
The NFC is hands down. I think it's the San Francisco 49ers. I think they're the most complete team that there is.
Well, especially after picking up Chase Young. That defensive line has been a problem for everybody. And yeah, I think the same thing. I don't think it's very far off from the Eagles though.
No. But then the Eagles had their asses handed to them the last 2 weeks
by the Niners and the Cowboys.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't know. I think the Cowboys are a team that always never figures it out in those kind of environments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I've personally never seen it as much in football, but Jalen Hurts has a very kind of Mamba mentality. I don't know if it's just a show or if he's actually about it, but I don't know. I'm a big fan of Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I think he's a good leader. I think he's perfect for the Eagles. I mean, but you look at plus minus, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both the Eagles and the Cowboys are 10-3.
Right.
And the Eagles, and the Niners. But I'm just comparing. So here, let's compare the three teams. The top three teams, they're all 10-3 in the NFC. So the points for, points against differential is what I'm referring to when I say plus minus. Cowboys are plus 188.
Mm-hmm.
They're the only team in the NFC that scored more than 400 points this season. The San Francisco 49ers are plus 175. They're just shy of 400 points for. They're at 380. The Eagles, interestingly enough, they're only plus 21.
Really?
In point differential. So is it because every game that they lost was a blowout loss? Or is there some other reason? They're winning. I mean, there was a stretch there before they went on this, 2-game losing streak where they were winning close games that they had no business winning. Actually, I mean, there was that one game where the last game they won, it took a 59 or they took like a 60-yard field goal to tie to go into overtime.
Yeah, that was crazy. I watched that game.
How many times are you going to hit a field goal at that length to tie it? I mean, there's a lot of luck in that. Well, however, you gotta give the Eagles, some benefit of the doubt in that, they're the defending NFC champions. They lost the Super Bowl last year, so they have every incentive to make it back and win the Super Bowl this year. So, I mean, I'll agree with anybody that says that the Eagles are a formidable team that you cannot overlook. I mean, obviously they're a 10-3 team, but from what I've seen so far this year, the 49ers, I think, is the elite team in the NFC. Dallas Cowboys, sort of the way they started this year and how they were really steamrolled early in the season by the Niners and the Eagles. I didn't think they were necessarily in the same class as those two other teams, but they've sort of proven me wrong. And now they are, ahead of the Eagles in the NFC East as the first place team.
Right. And back to that Eagles game. That kick wasn't what won them the game. It was a missed route by Gabe Davis on the Bills.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've been getting kind of lucky in that regard. Even I believe when they played the Chiefs, they lost because that guy Valdez Scantling dropped that wide open pass that would have scored him a touchdown.
Right.
So in that
But
regard,
that's sort of been, if we want to touch on Kansas City for, briefly right now, before we get, dive deeper into the AFC. I mean, that's sort of been the Chiefs' MO this year in that they really don't have anybody that could catch the ball other than Travis Kelce. And I think the last several weeks, they've sort of been exposed as a one-dimensional offensive team. I think there was, they've looked a little bit better this week, despite the fact that they lost, because Edwards-Helaire came back. That it adds a little, a different dimension to their offense. But man, they're wide receivers. They don't run their routes correctly. They drop balls constantly. I mean, heck, what's his name, Tony, cost them the game. Basically, yeah. I mean, because you can't even figure out where to stand. You have to stand, in the neutral zone. You can't tell. How many years have you been playing football, for crying out loud?
Well, their best receiver now is Rashee Rice, who I believe is a rookie.
Yeah.
I don't know, if you're a team like the Chiefs, with all due respect to to Rice, he's a good wide receiver, but you don't want to have your main receiver with such little experience in the NFL.
Yeah.
They're clearly really missing Tyreek Hill, which is, not to diss Mahomes, but I think he's absolutely carried by talent around him, as what they say about what's his name, Brock Purdy. And I think now that's kind of being exposed, as you said before, as a one-dimensional team, just to check Travis Kelce or whatever it may be.
I think football, almost more than any other sport, is a sport that one person really can't carry on their back. He has to have
because of the defensive aspect, though. That's the main piece. And on top of that, I don't think the Chiefs have an outstanding defense either.
But I always go back. This is like before your time, but I always talk about, Peyton and Eli's dad, Archie Manning, was one of the great college quarterbacks, runner, could throw, but he unfortunately got drafted by the New Orleans Saints, which was the worst franchise in the NFL during that time.
Right.
I think he played 14 seasons in the NFL, 12 of them with the Saints. Basically every year for 12 years, he just, got sacked almost every play, just got his butt beat down every week. I mean, he was the perfect example of a really good player with no talent around him, and he couldn't do it all by himself. And I think you're not giving Mahomes enough credit if you're saying that he's just a product of, the team that's around him. But I don't think that's 100% true. And I think that game, a couple of years ago in the playoffs against the Bills, when him and Josh Allen were going back and forth the last 3 or 4 minutes of the game, trying to decide who's going to win. And then he scored what? The last drive was with like 25 seconds left in the game or something like that. And he scored another touchdown. So to me, he's a very, very talented quarterback, very talented player. Granted, he's even better when he has, talent around him. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the same level of talent around him that he's accustomed to. So I think, because I would argue that the issues the Chiefs have this year has more to do with the offense than it has to do with their defense. I think their defense has played pretty well.
I mean, their defense is fine, but it's not like really good.
It's not an elite defense like the 49ers defense.
Yeah.
Or even the Cowboys defense.
Oh, well, the Cowboys defense is a huge reason they score a lot. I mean, that the Deron Bland guy broke the pick six record.
Right.
So with bringing it back to that plus whatever they have, that the defense is a
Mhm.
huge piece of that.
I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. So in the NFC, when so I think we both agreed that the there are three elite teams there: the Cowboys, the Eagles, and the Niners.
Right.
Then you have one team at 9-4, the
Yeah.
Detroit
Detroit.
Lions, who I think is slowly being exposed as sort of you know a pretender team, not a true contender.
You know why? I think they're too young. I think that they're too, what's it called? They're just not they haven't been
Experienced.
they haven't been around the top for long enough. They
Yeah.
haven't had these they haven't had seasons like this before.
Oh,
When your tight end is a rookie who's really proven to be good. I mean,
mhm.
Amon Ra can't be that old.
No,
And
no, he's not.
I mean, Jared Goff is a good quarterback, but
Yep.
is he the Super Bowl quarterback? I don't know.
No, I don't think so.
So that's what you have to consider with that team. I also
Hmm.
think that the defense is developing. I believe that Aiden Hutchinson guy is also maybe a rookie or only a few years in
Right.
on the E line. So that they're showing a good sign for a team that has this little of experience. But
Right.
yeah, I'm gonna overlook them for this season.
Right. And then, the NFC South is the weak division. We have three teams tied for first place at 6 wins, 7 losses. You got the Bucks, Falcons, Saints. Unfortunately, division winners qualify for the playoffs. So there's a strong possibility that there'll be a team that's under 500, that finishes under 500 in the NFC, that will be in the playoffs. Um,
Well,
so
who do you think that's gonna be?
of the three teams,
Yeah, Saints, Falcons, Bucks.
if I had to pick a team right now, I don't know. Maybe the Bucks.
I think maybe the Bucks. They have that.
Uh,
I guess they have a recent winning culture. They haven't.
yeah.
Not hasn't been too long since they won their last Super
All right.
Bowl. Although the Falcons do have Young Hoku,
Right.
the kicker,
Yeah.
who missed 2 field goals last night.
Did he really?
Yeah, embarrassing. But
Uh-huh.
yeah. I don't think this. I think the Saints have too much trouble going on with their quarterback situation. I think
Yeah.
the Falcons are another team that's too young, and they also have a terrible quarterback, um, and a very flawed offense.
Yeah.
I think the Bucks, as I said, they have previous winning culture of not that many years ago, and I think I don't think Baker's a bad quarterback. I think that he's gone through it and he's
Hmm.
kind of learned how to work. Because obviously, didn't he win a Heisman, Baker? Coming into the NFL after winning a Heisman gives you a bit of
Yeah. 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 Hmm.
air in your head, and you don't really understand. But I think now he's learned his lesson being a backup quarterback, and now finally getting his opportunity again to start of what it takes to work within a system.
Yeah. Every once in a while, some of these guys just need to be humbled a little
Right.
for
And
them to wake up.
and he's been pretty good, playing pretty good. So.
Yeah. So, all right, week 14, if you had to decide today who's going to qualify for the Super Bowl out of the NFC, who do you pick?
Out of the NFC, I don't know why. I'm biased because I like Jalen Hurts. I think the Eagles
Hmm.
are going to win. I
Okay.
think they're going to take it just, and it's going to be between the deciding game. Doesn't matter where it's played in the bracket.
Hmm.
Is going to
Hmm.
be between the Niners and the Eagles.
So, you think the NFC Championship will be a rematch of last year's?
Right. Depending on how the
Okay.
bracket looks.
Okay. All right. I'll buy that.
Yep.
That's good. All right. Let's jump over to the AFC. The AFC is a little bit more jumbled up and they're packed a lot closer.
Right.
You have the number one seed in the AFC is the 10-3 Baltimore Ravens. They've looked pretty good the last few weeks. They've won their last three games, including this past weekend against the Rams, where they were, kind of flirting with losing to them, but they pulled it out at the end. Then you have let's see, you have the Dolphins at 9-4,
Chiefs.
the Chiefs are a game behind that, I believe. The
Right.
Chiefs are 8-5, but they're also a division leader. And surprisingly, their lead for the AFC West is now only a game above the Denver Broncos, who are now 7-6. That is the same Denver Broncos team that gave up 70 points in one game against the Dolphins earlier this season. Then you have other 8-5 teams, counting the Chiefs. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who lost this week. You have the Cleveland Browns, who have quite possibly, the best defense in the AFC, I think.
Well, they're definitely the best. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And then you have the Buffalo Bills hanging on by a thread at 7-6, 2 games behind the Dolphins. But the Dolphins, they lost a game last night that they had no business losing.
Yeah, that was
they had
kind
a 14. Yeah, they had a 14-point lead with maybe a little bit over 4 minutes left in the game, and they blew the whole thing. The other 3 losses that they had this season are against Buffalo, Kansas City, and Philadelphia. So they haven't beaten any elite team. Every other team that they've played have been 500 or worse. So, I mean, you could only play the teams that you're scheduled to play. So you can't blame them for the schedule, but you can sort of blame them for losing a game that they were 13.5 point favorites at home, and blow it in the last 4 minutes. And now, they're a game behind Baltimore. They had the number 1 seed position last week. Now they're the second seed.
Yeah, second.
Yeah. So they'll have at least a couple of home playoff games. So what do you think? Who do you like in the AFC?
Just to start off with the Dolphins and losing that game, I think the reason they couldn't really, I guess, get their feet under them is losing Tyreek Hill early in the game. That's a huge momentum killer.
Well, their offense completely
it's
changed after he got pulled. I mean, after he was on the sidelines.
Right.
I mean, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go by which teams deserve to be talked about. So Dolphins, I think that they have a really good shot at it this year. I think Tua is on a mission to prove himself, and he has been this whole season after his injuries and whatnot. And I think that when you have a wide receiver who's putting up a season that could be considered an MVP season, that's pretty special as well. Even seeing how the defense operated ever since Jalen Ramsey came back, they've been absolutely playing out of their mind. And I think it's a good recipe to play well right now. If you want to make it's a good time to start playing well.
So the one thing the Dolphins have going for them, they have the Jets next week.
Right.
That hopefully they don't, choke on that game. The other thing that they have going for them is they do have a game against the Ravens. And I believe the game against the Ravens is in Miami. Let me check that. Oh, no, it's in Baltimore. But it's the second from last game of the season, assuming, the two teams are within striking distance of one another, if not tied. I think that game will probably decide the number 1 seed in the AFC. However, the Dolphins have to keep in mind that, despite the fact that the Jets next week are the easiest game they have left, They have the Cowboys after that, the Ravens after that, and the Bills to end the season. So they have a tough final 3 weeks. That's why I thought it was a really important game to win last week. I would have preferred if the Dolphins were 11-3 going into the final 3 weeks.
Right.
But now the best they're going to be is 10-4. Hopefully that's what happens. We touched upon the Chiefs already, but you always have to sort of be wary of the Chiefs. I mean, they've always been a formidable team, but it looks like this year will be the first time that Patrick Mahomes will be forced to play playoff games away from Kansas City. So
Right.
he'll have road playoff games this year, which he's never had before, which is a absolutely incredible statistic. And the other team that maybe somebody that we need to discuss is the Jacksonville Jaguars at 8-5. But what I didn't realize until I'm looking at the stats now is the Jacksonville Jaguars, of the 5 games they lost, 4 of them were at home, which is a scary stat.
Right.
For any NFL team.
Yeah. Well, I'm not too crazy about the Jaguars. I think there's too much. I think even though this is a tighter race, I think that it's similar to the NFC, that I feel like there's your top teams and there's really going to be nobody else in contention.
Right.
Obviously you can't count the Chiefs out, as you said.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Dolphins and Ravens playing how they are, I don't see the Jaguars, whoever they get matched up against, beating those teams.
Right.
And especially with Trevor Lawrence battling injury now after last week.
Right.
I believe Christian Kirk is also on the IR. Their wide receiver. So I don't it's not a good time to be dealing with stuff like that going into the end of the season. And with players like that dealing with these injuries, you could go in with a worse record and maybe, not get the matchup you want, or maybe not even make the playoffs.
So having said all of that, who do you like coming out of the AFC?
Well, obviously I'm biased with the Dolphins. But realistically, I don't think that any of these teams are better than the Dolphins if they're both playing their best day. So if the Dolphins have their best day and the Chiefs have their best day too, I think the Dolphins' best day beats the best day.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, the Dolphins are the only team in the AFC that scored over 400 points this season. So I think it's only the Dolphins and the Cowboys that have scored over 400 points. Dolphins, the Bills, the Ravens, they're the only 3 teams in the AFC that have a point differential over 100.
Right.
So all 3 teams, although Buffalo, they're sort of, like I said, hanging on at 7-6. I mean, any misstep, they almost have to run the table in order to assure themselves a spot in the playoffs, I think. Because you have other 7-6 teams like the Texans, the Colts, the Broncos, surprisingly, really made a huge,
the Broncos.
Huge,
I think this stretch is a little bit of a fluke.
Yeah.
I just think it's what is it called? Some Linsanity for the Broncos.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess we could touch on the Texans for a bit because something we also wanted to tie in is injuries.
Right.
And it's not just the Texans, but the most recently, CJ Stroud went down with, we don't really know what it is yet. He got rocked, just to put it simple. and even Tank Dell went down. He's out for the season. And
Right.
now Nico Collins, their other receiver, he's injured now, and we don't know his status on if he's going to return or not. So yeah, I think the Texans are a very young, promising team. The fact that CJ Stroud could come in as a rookie and be a top 5 MVP candidate, in my opinion, I don't know if that's
Mhm.
statistically what it is right now, is very impressive. But um, their wide receiver, not literally their wide receiver one, but what looked like their wide receiver one, Tank Dell, rookie, and their
Mhm.
quarterback, rookie. That that's not a not necessarily the combination you want to win the Super Bowl right off the bat, but down the
Right.
line, as they continue to work together, I think that they will figure something out. But I think I could count them out for this year, just based off of the fact of what they're dealing with, injury wise, and just even if everybody was at full health, they're not the most experienced team.
Right. So you still like the Dolphins? So you're looking at perhaps a Dolphins Eagles Super Bowl? Is
I
that
think
what
that's
you're thinking
yeah,
right now?
I think that's very possible. I
Hmm.
don't know why. Just in my mind, I don't see the Ravens making it to the Super Bowl. I don't know why.
Okay. Hmm.
But yeah, I something about the Chiefs always is just probably for all these teams is just haunting.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know that you know what they're capable of.
What's the AFC Championship game in your opinion?
Um, I
Well,
think
Dolphins has to be one of the teams.
wait, right. And I think that um it'll be the Chiefs,
Dolphins
or
Chiefs.
if let's say the Dolphins and the Chiefs play each other earlier before the championship, I think that there's going to be a sneaky team that beats the Ravens and ends up playing the Dolphins. And who
Okay.
that might be, I'm not sure, but I I I don't know why I just can't picture the Ravens
Yeah.
successful. And I mean, they're another team who their best receiver is a rookie, and Mark
Hmm.
Andrews, their tight end, their star tight end, is out for the season as well.
Hmm.
Even though they're continuing this momentum, it's just losing big pieces and having damaged players is just a hard road, especially in football, where you're constantly taking damage every time you step on the field.
Well, look at the Dolphins too, right? They lost Connor Williams, their center, last night. Right.
Right.
And
Jalen
turns
Phillips.
out Jalen Phillips, a couple of weeks prior.
Mhm.
And then, turns out Connor Williams is an ACL, so his done for the year. That offensive line has taken a beating all season. I mean, that final drive, I mean, Tua had like no time to even look at anything. I
Well,
mean,
that
he's got one of yeah,
they ultimately went down because he had to run, and
right.
that's what he does. So yeah, injuries have been a big issue this entire season for
Yep.
everybody. And I think when it comes down to who makes it the furthest, it comes down to the ones who are damaged the least. And I
Yep.
think you can apply that to a lot of sports, but I think that's also it's much so more prominent than football.
So what do you think? This is sort of a little bit off the topic that we're discussing, but it still has to do with NFL. 4 plays into the season, playing at MetLife, Aaron Rodgers blows out his Achilles. Uh, Jalen Phillips blows out his Achilles on that same field a couple of weeks ago. A couple of years ago, Saquon Barkley blew out his knee on that same field. So
Well,
there was an article a couple of weeks ago about how many Achilles and how many knee injuries have been a product of that field at MetLife. Is it the field? And
well,
if so, what should the NFL do about it?
Well, I think it comes down to the whole conversation of turf versus grass,
Yeah.
right? Um, when I look at old videos, it looks like football was always played on grass.
Yes.
Um, I don't necessarily know the appeal of turf besides the fact that maybe it's easier to maintain uh,
Probably.
for the stadium and whatnot. But I think that you know, for lack of a better example, there's a reason we don't play professional basketball on trampolines.
Mhm.
It's a good idea to keep it classic in that sense. I don't think that that's something that needs to be changed. I think that you should play it on a normal field, grass field. Every player agrees. Travis Kelsey even said it on his podcast that it feels harder to land on turf when you're getting tackled.
Mhm.
So if these turf fields are claiming all these players with injuries, and even the players themselves are like, "Damn, that hurts whenever I'm playing on this field." I don't I don't see why, besides the fact that maybe it's easier to maintain, you want to have these turf fields just for the sake of loving the game and wanting it to be played at the best way possible and the safest way possible.
Well, if you look at Major League Baseball,
Right.
I just looked it up. There are only 5 Major League Baseball stadiums that play on artificial surface.
Right.
Now, they all have natural grass. The only 5 stadiums that have artificial surface is Chase Field, where the Diamondbacks play, Globe Life Field, where the Texas Rangers play, uh, what is this? Lone Depot Park, where the Marlins. They don't even know the names of these stadiums. Rogers Center, where the Toronto Blue Jays play, and Tropicana Field, where Tampa Bay plays. So I think the fact that Tropicana Field is an artificial surface leads me to believe, and it's played by the Tampa Bay Rays. I think you're right about the cost to maintain a grass or a natural field versus an artificial field. An artificial surface must be less expensive to maintain because
Right.
Tampa always worries about the bottom line.
Well,
But
I looked up some
looking at this thing, I didn't realize until looking at this thing now that it was an all artificial surface World Series this year with the
yeah,
Diamondbacks and the Rangers. Go ahead.
and you mentioned the Marlins Park, right? The Lone Depot
Mm-hmm.
Marlins.
Yeah.
So I looked up a stat just to double check myself.
Mm-hmm.
And remember when Ronald Acuna tore his ACL?
Yeah.
That was there.
Okay.
So it's it's an interesting thing to keep in mind that it even happened in baseball.
Yeah.
So
And the fact that baseball has because baseball used to have a lot more stadiums with artificial surfaces,
right.
and they've sort of all come back to using the
Right.
natural
And
grass
baseball
surface.
sport where I mean, with the exception of the elbow, you don't really hear about many injuries uh
Mm-hmm.
in baseball. Um
Right.
so to hear about one like Ronald Acuna's when the year they won the World Series,
Mm-hmm.
he had
Yeah.
to miss the rest of his season because he played. I'm not going to blame it on a turf field, but he played on a turf field
Yeah.
and got injured.
Yep.
So
Wow.
yeah, that's definitely
Interesting.
yeah. It's I think it's an issue, especially in a high contact sport.
Yeah.
And if yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. And a lot more what I would call twitch muscles or twitch movement that you need playing football, basketball, where you change directions much more often and more quickly. I think those type of movements lead to that. That's why we've always had Achilles injuries in the NBA to a lot of jumping and landing on your feet. And when you're what 250 pounds or 60 pounds, like LeBron, the pounding on your knees and your feet and your Achilles have to be pretty tremendous.
Right.
I mean, look at Shaquille O'Neal. I mean, if his feet were okay, he could probably still be playing, just steamrolling people.
Yeah, he would definitely bully a couple of guys that are around still.
Yeah, true. So, anything else about the NFL football season that we would like to discuss at this
Um,
point?
who are your picks for the Super Bowl?
Um, I never pick my team. I always find it to be a jinx if you pick your own team.
Yeah.
And the Dolphins have been, every time I've watched them, they've been so disappointing this season. Because I think every game that I've watched is a game, every time they've been featured on television, they have underperformed, underachieved. And it's frustrating watching them.
Right.
Um, so as far as the AFC is concerned, I sort of agree with you. I'm not completely sold on the Baltimore Ravens, but this is the feeling that I had about the Texas Rangers during the baseball season this year, and I was dead wrong about that. I still like the Kansas City Chiefs just because of their pedigree,
Right.
despite of the issues that they're currently having. And as much as I don't want to say it, I mean, I guess the Dolphins have as good a chance as any one of these teams in the AFC on any given day, as you said. If the Dolphins are playing at their peak, they could beat a team playing at their peak if they're playing well, too. And it has to come. There's got to come a point in the process of developing this Dolphins team, including their coaching staff. Their head coach is a young guy too. To me, part of the issue with the Dolphins, and especially when they're featured on TV, is that they speak so highly of him that he feels like he needs to do something super intelligent or something like that, and he overthinks stuff.
Yeah.
And there's so many times last night where you know they weren't really protecting Tua well. I would have been happy with them just handing the ball off to a Chain and Mostert, because they were running the ball pretty well. They were like 5-6 yard chunks every time. Just give them the ball,
Right.
you know, instead of getting cute with all the movement and, just stop. Just like play a little bit normal football every once in a while and don't try to overthink it. So anyway, now that I had my soapbox moment, like I said, I think the Dolphins have as good a chance as any. But if I had to pick some one team today, I would pick the Chiefs again, just because of their pedigree. They know what it takes. The one advantage, if the season were ending today, the one advantage the Dolphins would have if they had to play the Chiefs in the playoffs is the Dolphins would have the home field, and playing on the road during the postseason is not something that Mahomes is accustomed to. So,
Right.
but should be interesting. 4 more weeks left. We shall see.
We shall see.